Awesome.
All right, welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Jane Irrigation Training Series. I'm Richard Restuccia, Vice President of Water Management Solutions for Jane. And today we're going to be talking about getting your irrigation system ready for summer. And I love this because it takes me a little motivation to get going on this, right? Because yeah, I definitely have extra time right now that I don't have in the summer when we're really out in the field looking at irrigation, fixing irrigation, making recommendations on irrigation. And now is the time to maintain, but sometimes I don't always do it, right? And boy, those are the years that I really have some problems because waiting is never a good idea. I'm learning that a lot. If you got the time, take care of it today, take care of it now. It's going to pay off so much more in the future. So it's one thing to say, make your irrigation system summer ready, but the more important thing is how do you actually do that? Well, teaching us today how to do that is Cory Broad. He's a territory sales manager and a product manager for Jane Irrigation. He's also a certified crop advisor. He's a certified irrigation designer. He was also the Madera County Agriculturist of the Year a couple of years ago. And I've known Cory a while now. And one thing, man, if I was farming in the Central Valley, he'd be my first call, not just today, but throughout every week, because he is a wealth of knowledge. And it's one thing to have the knowledge. The other thing is to actually want to share it. And that's the thing that I most admire about Cory is he really does want to share his knowledge and he wants to make you successful. So that's why I always like having Cory on. So Cory, welcome. How are you today?
I'm great, Richard. I appreciate the kind words in the introduction and something that I'm looking forward to talking about and hopefully getting folks to implement sooner rather than later. Your introduction, because it will make your life easier, and I guarantee you it will make mine probably on a hot July day a little bit easier also.
Yeah, exactly. And right, for some reason, right, when I'm standing in Southern California on a 65-degree day, I forget what heat is like. And boy, it sure makes it harder to do stuff when it's over 100 degrees. So, but Cory, look, I saw you at World Ag a couple of weeks ago. Great crowd there. I know you talked to a lot of people at World Ag, but it was in the 70s in Tulare that day. Southern California was tipping up in the 80s. Is the season started? I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's been a hectic couple of weeks with the weather shift. Obviously, with the almond crop starting to come online, and I say that because we are getting into bloom time, and obviously weather dependent. Usually a week before or a week later kind of scenario, and so it's pretty much in full bloom right now. Next week we'll be kind of in the middle of it, depending on what variety you have and exactly where you're located in the state, because it's based on heat units. But yeah, it's going. Part of this presentation is to, as you said, motivate somebody to think about where we are. The season is here and it's really upon us. And so the best thing we can do is get ahead of this well before we need it. I know that most almond growers that I work with from a water management perspective, we've already applied irrigation. Many of other customers that I just kind of visually watch and pass by, they're also running water. We're not quite there in most of our vineyards yet, or even some of our pistachio crops, but you give them this continual heat units and all of a sudden we may be a little bit early on those crops as well.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, one thing I noticed driving up was I couldn't believe the amount of beehives that were being trailered up. And I saw, so 2 weeks ago, I already saw a bit of bloom happening. It was just starting on quite a few trees. So I was like, wow, this is getting started early.
Absolutely. Well, I got a picture I took yesterday in my slide deck here of some almond blooms around the corner from the house. And so it's not uncommon right now to see a lot of folks stopped on the side of the road taking family pictures in orchards that aren't theirs. So it's kind of a pastime in the valley, but a signaling of the change of the season and the new year.
Yeah, I guess they just don't understand how nervous that makes some people when that's happening. But
absolutely.
Anyway, well, let's get to your presentation.
Absolutely. So appreciate the opportunity. So on topic, there's our photo of some blooms I took yesterday just around the corner from my house. And as I said, these blooms on the almond trees kind of signal a new season ahead, and we know about the opportunities and then also the challenges that ag is in particular going to face this year. It's probably going to be pretty short on water supplies across the state. I know that that's going to be very real for many of the growers that I work with. And again, it will be challenging, but there are some opportunities to maybe invest and help manage that water in a different way. And those challenges exist for the irrigation systems that are going to have to run probably more, as we just kind of referred to. They're starting earlier, and they may have to pump longer and a longer duration throughout the season. And so it puts wear on those components. And then, like I said, that environment that we're operating in is very unpredictable. We have those increased temperatures you referred to. I just talked about limited water supplies. So I felt that it's really pertinent to look at maybe 7 quick tips. I originally had thought about just throwing 7 tips up on there saying, hey, go do these, because this presentation is really short and I just gave you the time to go get it done. But going through it, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't dive into some of them in a little more detail.
Yeah. Barry, I just want to interrupt your presentation for one moment. And, I see here, it was a wet December. And man, we went from no snow to great snow in December up in the mountains. But how was January and February?
Some of the driest on record. And it's really kind of stalled out the momentum that we had from that water storage perspective. Obviously, California is a little complex from the ag side on water with state water and federal water. I know that the latest update that I've seen is the state water project. The contractors for ag are going to get about 15% of their full allocation. So certainly not enough to grow pretty much any of the commodities that we grow here. And I know that most of the federal water, they haven't really done the full allocation yet, but it's looking pretty grim at this point.
Yeah, so when I hear that number, I always like, did I hear that right? This is 15%, not 15% from 100, but just 15%.
Yeah, it's basically, there's a number of different contractual allegations that people are allowed. Different districts allocate on an acreage basis, which is probably some of the most common. But yeah, I mean, you're basically saying you're paying 100% and you're getting 15% of what you would expect.
Yeah, that's rough. That is really rough.
Certainly so.
Yeah, so you better have your irrigation system ready, because you're not going to be able to waste the drop.
Not at all. Not in a year like this, and coming off of a year like last year, where we're kind of similar results with a water allocation perspective. So with that, water budgeting would be key, right, Richard? I think if we don't know how much we're using or how much we're going to need, it's going to be really hard to plan on taking that road trip, as I call it. Every season's a road trip. So obviously you want to prepare your system and have a goal in mind on how many hours you're going to pump. If you can sit there and say, I plan on getting 15% from a district, how much am I going to have to pump in total? How many hours am I going to have to run my irrigation system for? It can help you determine how much financial and time investment you need to do for the upcoming season. Maybe if you realize that you're in a good water area and you don't have to pump a lot, maybe the tips that I'm going to give today can go on the back burner a tad bit. But I think the reality is, for most of the state, as you can see on the graphic on the left-hand side, it's probably not going to be the case. That's actually a live map that you can pull from the California Water Resources Board, and it's just reservoir levels across the state. And so it's not really meant for everybody to be able to see and necessarily go through, but I think you can see the gist of, you have a blue bar and you have a yellow bar, and most of those are half or less full, and that is certainly going to impact us. And so understanding what crops you're going to be irrigating is important too, because some growers are going to fallow, especially in the western part of Fresno County. They will save the water, quote unquote, for pistachios and for almonds and for grapes, because it's really hard to just stop irrigating those and expect them to come back next year. Whereas if you have something maybe like a processing tomato, onion, garlic, so on and so forth, maybe you forego planting that. And which is sad, but we got to understand what that crop mix is going to be and what that water use is for each of those crops. And obviously for that, digital tools like our Jane Logic program with the monitoring side, we can get actual crop evapotranspiration, actual crop water use. And we have that both basically on a weekly basis, but also from a historical perspective, where by year for the last 5 years, we can provide through our suite of tools, information, and our partner AgriLogics with a map to show you, Richard, here's your farm, and by block, here's how much water you're using on each of these crops. And that way you could sit down and say, well, my average fuel economy is 22 miles to the gallon, and I'm going on this long of a road trip. Okay, we're going to need to fill up this many times. Kind of the same concept when approaching irrigation.
Yes, so this is a light bulb moment right here, Cory, and I'll tell you why. You mentioned this for growers. I'm thinking even if I'm a landscaper managing 10 acres of HOA turf, or if I'm a homeowner sitting in LA with a 1/4 acre of turf, I can still go in this time of year and I can start to figure out how much water my landscape's going to need this summer. If it's an average summer, I can budget for it. Instead of making it a surprise when I get my bill 2 months after I've used it, I can sit down and figure out, this is what water is going to cost me this summer. And you can start even budgeting from that standpoint. I think that's a great concept. I think it's majority of people in urban settings are not even thinking about it, far less doing it.
Absolutely. But again, it's part of that opportunity. And I think that's very exciting. And we're learning more. Everybody's learning more about what water use goes to. How much does a lawn take? How much does an almond tree take? And where can we budget and make that all come together? And I think that's the most exciting part about what we're doing. And so these are just, again, some snapshots. Every slide, I kind of want to do a segment right behind it of just showing you some visualizations to where if you're a farmer, you can see the changes in the graphs and very easily quantify that. And then also give a visual or spatial recognition on the right-hand side, which is kind of the green, red, and yellow. These are from a hyper-analyzed report from our partner at AgriLogics that we can provide to growers on a per acre basis or per field basis so that they can see where the water is going, how much they're going to need, and then also what impact is that having on the crop. And I think that information is invaluable in this kind of environment that we're operating in.
Cory, I just want to ask you one thing about that satellite image.
Yes.
Why is there all that red on there?
It's probably just a dirt road maybe on the side of it. It's picking up some field boundary edges. And when you think about drawing these boundaries, you're drawing a two-dimensional image on a spherical surface, right, being the earth and a number of things. So it's probably just a dirt avenue. So I think we're going to be okay. And but if that was in the middle of this image, I think we'd also be a little bit worried.
Okay, I'm feeling a little dust on myself right now. But
yep, we're good.
Only my truck kicking it up when I'm driving around.
Exactly. So we talk about budgeting and trying to create this idea of what we're going to do. And then I'm also hoping to entice everybody here today to go and participate in fixing their irrigation system or getting it up and running. But it's going to be really hard to change the oil in your car if you don't have an oil filter and any oil to do it. So obviously there's a lot of components in our irrigation systems, and many of these systems that are put out by the dealers have components that come from various manufacturers. I think one of the unique things about Jane, and that I've always enjoyed about both being a customer for Jane traditionally, and then also working for Jane over almost the last 7 years, is we're a single manufacturer that has everything except pipes and pumps. So we have the opportunity to bring all of that to a grower, a dealer, and say, hey, work with us, partner with us, maximize that value, understand these inventory positions a little bit better. And again, some of the key items that I encourage people to focus on is if you have a double line drip, maybe in an orchard, or even single line drip in like a vineyard application, have that emitter line, amnon or top drip, have your blank tubing ready. And then if you're just using blank tubing to run sprinklers or drippers, you probably want some of those laying around, and most farms and ranches do. But couplers, swivel tees, flush valves, all the little fittings, right, that kind of put all this together. I know that we're moving a lot of couplers right now, Richard, just kind of given the change of the season and people firing up, and there's leftover damage from last year, there's wildlife damage. So having a lot of that on hand is going to be key. Air vents, picture on the left-hand side, they get hit with tractors a lot. It seems to be people trip over them. There's a number of things that go on. So having air vents and having the right air vents, right? These are two different air vents that have two different functions, despite them both being 2 inches. So having the right one is good. And then filter components, solenoids and wires and maybe some extra media if you have sand media or an extra filter screen. We'll go into that a little bit more coming up.
Hey, Cory, I have a question. Are all manufacturers half-inch tubing the same size?
Not at all. It's very, very important. I feel like we do a great job in our catalog and a lot of our technical brochures that list what we have, I'll say commercially available or more commonly available, but we can do custom runs also. But understanding the inside diameter and the outside diameter is going to be key, because it may fit on a certain type of fitting, whether it's compression, just an insert barb fitting, or something like our power lock where it kind of has the best of both worlds. Understanding what is going to work with those types of fittings is key. And yes, manufacturer to manufacturer, you need to be careful on what that's going to be.
Yeah, so I heard that the Jane power lock fittings, though, fit multiple manufacturers' tubing. Is that correct?
And that's why I mentioned kind of the best of both worlds, because you get that insert barb action that goes inside the tubing and really holds onto the inside diameter. But then we have what we call a locking nut mechanism that goes over the top, and that kind of treats it just like a compression fitting. And so again, you kind of get the best of both worlds, where, I see it in these big ag settings. You talked about this 540 acres. I mean, if you have something pop off or break out there, you're probably not going to find it for a long time, and it's going to make a bit of a mess. And so growers really depend on the functionality and the fit of those fittings that we sell, being power lock line, and it really seems to go a long ways.
Yeah, I'm certainly going to have some of those in the truck, right? As Eric Olson always likes to remind me, Richard, we're not always 10 minutes from a Home Depot.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's the right fit. I think I have just about every type of fitting we have in our factory in my toolbox. So you always have to have them. And so again, just talking about some of those things. I mean, here's a picture of some stuff that was actually in my garage on the right-hand side that are just prepped for the season, where there's emergency calls and different things, all kinds of different couplers and tees. There's a picture of a swivel tee on the left-hand side, and it's actually the screen that's inside of it is plugged up with some debris, probably leftover fertilizer or something from late last season. And so maybe the fitting itself isn't broken, but actually inspecting it and understanding what's going on with it is going to be key. And some growers don't even know that they have screens in them. Not every single swivel tee does, but and just be remiss if I didn't bring up, make sure you know if you have those screens or not, because if they are plugged, that could short you on water. It's technically a damaged item, even though it's cleanable, and you may not even know it.
How hard are those to clean, Cory?
It's just time. It's not too bad. A lot of the times what I do in a double line drip application is I take the side off that's dirty, and if the other side's pretty clean, you just run water backwards the other way and it'll blow it out. I've also seen growers that go through and take them out, have the field crew go through, take them out, maybe leave them in a bucket of soap for a little bit, and then rinse them out and throw them back in. So it's a time-consuming process, but it's one that's certainly worthwhile.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So we talked about getting all these parts together. Now let's actually start using some of these parts that I hopefully got everybody to go out and go get prepped for. And obviously the filter station is a top priority in our system. It's you think about our large scale ag that I was just referring to. These pumping plants are expensive. They move or filter a ton of water, and they service a very, very large area of probably very, very valuable crops. So if there's an issue with them, you could be putting your whole field and or system at risk. And so I always start by inspecting the filter elements. So if you have a screen filter like a spin clean, check the screen, make sure it's not damaged, make sure it's not worn. Word to the wise, spin clean screens are great. They're a three-piece sintered technology, and the way that they're manufactured, they're very strong. But if they get overpressurized or they get excessive amounts of debris, they can basically become sandblasted in a week. And I've seen that happen, and they don't fail when your system isn't running. They only fail when you need water, and it's probably, again, July 29th. So I always see that kind of scenario come up. So having an extra screen on hand is great. Inspecting it ahead of time is even better. Sand media tanks, check your sand media levels. Make sure that your media is in good condition. It's not super round. You want those edges. I've talked about that in some of my other presentations. Check all your connections, look for around your gaskets and different things. Make sure you don't have any cracks or leaks or wearing of items. Inspect your chemigation tanks, the lines that connect them, the valves that turn them off and on, so on and so forth. That's obviously a safety issue. It's also something that can impact the health of your crop. If a valve sticks open or sticks closed, that can have a negative effect. And then one thing that I deal with quite a bit, and it's super simple, replace your gauges on your system, especially if they're facing the sun. They tend to get worn, become inaccurate, even unreadable. So having an insight into a good working gauge is going to be key to continue and make sure your system's running well. Solenoids on the backwash valves, wires. Probably most people won't have an extra controller laying around, but at least the wiring and some of the solenoids I think is realistic, but also knowing what controller you have, so that if something does happen, you can easily contact your dealer and go get a replacement without having to spend a lot of time figuring out what it actually is.
Great suggestions, Cory. I have a comment, right? Once the Murphy's Law, right? You're packed up, ready to go to Pismo, and you're going to have that problem, right? That's what's going to cause it. And then when you say check, do you mean just a visual check? You mean unscrew stuff? What do you mean by check?
So, like for instance, so I have some pictures here, and you can see that this is something it's a physical action. The system isn't even running. Where on the left-hand side, just pop open the caps to the sand media tanks and take a look inside, and you can see these are two different tanks, and there are two very different things going on here. And there was actually a third tank in this photo stream that looks even different than these ones. So understanding your media levels, the media condition of your media, so on and so forth. If we wouldn't have serviced these tanks, then one would be running low, one would actually be filling with debris, so on and so forth. So that's something that's a physical necessity. From checking to make sure a pressure gauge works, obviously it has to be under pressure and running. So there's some of those things that are going to take just a visual look, but also you running your system. And that's actually going to be one of my bullet points coming up, which is it's great to look at your car, but probably turn it on and read the gauges to make sure it's running good again before this long road trip. And I would like to point out that the picture on the right-hand side was 9:30 Sunday night. Somebody turned on their system, and this is what they got. And so obviously it doesn't really matter what type of filter you have. If you have that coming out of your well, you have an issue. But the good thing is they were doing this slightly ahead of time for what their crop needed from an irrigation standpoint. And so they're actually working with the well company to get this resolved right now. So getting into these pressure and flow checks, some of the simple tools that you would need to go do it in the field are on the left-hand side. I keep a little kit like this in my truck, and it's like a homegrown distribution uniformity test. It's pretty straightforward. As I just said, the irrigation system should be operated before. Notice I put this one, Richard, in bold and in caps. Irrigation is necessary. It'd be great to know that we're up and running and everything is good well ahead of time. And during this test run, as I refer to it, create a pressure map in your field, some flow maps if you're willing to take the measurements. And with that, really consider doing a DU or a modified DU test across your irrigation system. That's just taking something like 36 flow and pressure measurements. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not too bad, especially if you have a little bit of help, you divide and conquer. And it can go be a 2 or 3 minute check of a dripper flow rate in a certain area. And you want to kind of capture variability from like a low pressure, a medium, and a high pressure area of your field. So obviously closer to the pump is more likely to be higher pressure. But if you went and you said, wow, Cory, this is actually a low pressure area. Well, maybe there's a damaged valve or there's plugging going on inside the piping system or something. It gives you an idea to go, wow, this was supposed to be 35 pounds over here and it's 15. I think something's wrong. And kind of checking that. And I put the equation down at the bottom for distribution uniformity. Obviously, not everybody is maybe done one of these before. So if you need additional help, I know I've done some webinars in the past about it, and also definitely can reach out and be happy to talk about it. But from a visual representation, on the left-hand side, you can see that's a field map or an irrigation design. And then you can see how we just try to capture variability in all these little rectangles that I put in, which are areas that we took pressures and flows. And then you can just capture that data. And again, if you look at something that maybe at the bottom of that field or that picture was supposed to be closer to the pump, but it's showing lower pressure, you probably have something going on. And just having a graduated cylinder, take a little measurement, 2 to 3 minutes. And as you said, it's 70 degrees and really nice in the orchard right now. It's a heck of a time to get out and go do it.
Cory, on the slide prior to that one, sorry, I've messed you up here now, but you had something that looked like a lamp, right? But I don't think it, right? So it looks like a lamp kind of in the photo. What is that up there in the top left?
Oh, that's actually just cups, plastic cups. Ordered them online, just collection cups. So they're kind of wide mouth and easy to do. And then obviously you just stack them together to transport them around. But yeah, you basically have a pressure gauge in the top right that's adaptable with all the fittings you can see in the 2 rows on the very bottom of the photo, so that I can connect a drip tape, drip line of various sizes, tubing of various sizes, as you referred to. It's important to be able to do that. Some hose cutters, graduated cylinders, and then a collection cup.
Well, the collection cup, you run the water in there from the dripper and then pour it in the beaker, and that's how you measure if your distribution is uniform.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Now, it just kind of looked like a lamp there at first glance.
Yep. So irrigation system flush. This is from one of the customers I serviced from a water management perspective. I took this video last summer, and this system had been flushed maybe 3 weeks before. And so you can see that pretty quickly, depending on your water source and scenarios, it can build up pretty good. So as you go through and you take these pressure and flow measurements that we were talking about, you may notice that you need to flush an area. So again, if you see this excessive buildup, maybe inside the pipe, and now it's kind of rearing its head as lower pressure in that area of the irrigation system, or there's uneven loss, it gives you an idea of where to start. And again, as you can see in this photo, it was a little bit overdue despite it just being 3 weeks prior. Even if the system's operating normally, meaning you're not seeing any of those weird things, you should still start the season with a fresh irrigation flush. Again, I've referred to this like a road trip. If you're going to go drive to New York and back, it's probably not a bad idea to change the fluids in your vehicle, even if it's maybe not necessarily due. And then remember, flushing velocities are super important. We have an app on our website with our Jane run a length calculator. It's publicly available. If you need help operating it or using it, please reach out, but it is very user friendly. You want to keep 1.5 to 2 feet per second flushing velocity in order to help move the debris in a reasonable time frame, but also pick up some of the heavier debris that settles out earlier in your system.
Cory, you did a webinar with us before on flushing systems. It's one of our most popular webinars. In fact, there's a professor from Cal Poly who teaches irrigation there that says Cory's flushing is what a great webinar it is. Now, what do you think the #1 mistake people make when they're flushing their systems?
I used to believe that it was not doing it enough. Today, I believe that it's well-intentioned, but it's not executed properly. I believe that folks go out and they say, yeah, I have an issue and I'm trying to fix it. And they flush, but they don't have that right velocity, or they're not doing it for long enough with the right velocity, or all these few factors kind of play into it, and it creates an issue. I would also say that some of the irrigation systems don't lend themselves to ease of flushing, or even maybe have the right availability of that velocity because the design didn't incorporate that. So for growers, I always say, make sure that this is a topic of discussion with your irrigation dealer, especially if you're in, I'll say, a water challenged area from a quality standpoint, to make sure that you can evacuate these materials and that you're getting a good irrigation design so that it's easy to do. This particular field here that I helped with the water management side, we could basically go through and we can flush this field in quarters or in halves with the way that it's designed. And it's very, very effective when we do flush it.
Yeah, thanks. That's what I got out of it too. When I thought about if I have a 1/4 mile run of drip line, How long does it actually take for the water to flow through there? Of course, half inch, 3/4, it all matters. But when I started to think about that, I thought you really have to flush for a while, right? The length of time of the flush is really key.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's if you're already sending labor out there to tackle this, yeah, it may take a little bit longer to flush it right, but versus, doing it the wrong way, I think it pays for itself. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Yep. And so you can see some drippers that needed some flushing. The left-hand side is actually significantly better than the right-hand side. They're actually different fields. It's a competitor's product. And they were actually the one on the left-hand side. They called us because they have our Jane Logic probes out there, and they're saying the probe isn't reading. The probe isn't reading, and we're like, no, it's reading. It's working fine. They're like, no, I'm irrigating. It's not changing. Well, the drippers around the probe were plugged, and there were certainly more that looked like this than maybe not. So something that needed to be fixed. And the picture on the right-hand side, somebody called me about the end of July last year, right before almond harvest. And this is what was inside the irrigation system. And they had a lot of trouble on their hands, and they were flushing, and I felt like they were flushing well. They just weren't doing it enough. And so became an issue. So it's actually kind of a perfect segue into maintenance schedules. So you can go out and you can go do the right thing, Richard, and have all the figures mapped out and ready to go. But if we don't keep on schedule and we don't stay ahead, this is what we get. The picture on the left-hand side is something that I dealt with last year, where this irrigation system had actually not been flushed in 3 years, which still to this day is crazy to think about. I'm glad that it lasted. I say lasted as long as it did, in the sense that it actually performed very well up until it finally just couldn't take it anymore, and has actually been remediated through physical flushing and chemical treatment, is actually performing well again. But you can see the buildup. These are actually our emitters, but if you cover them in what looks like peanut butter, but I promise you isn't, you're certainly going to have an issue. And so we've talked about budgeting for this water use and getting all these pieces together, building this inventory, and then actually spending the time to fix it. Let's not let all that hard work go to the back burner, because we do get busy farming and we do get busy irrigating, which I completely understand and can relate to. But we have to have this maintenance schedule built. From a filter service standpoint, again, most folks usually take care of it once a year, maybe twice. As much as you're willing to do it, please do it. But at a minimum, I want to stress that that's what I would expect from our point as a manufacturer. Tubing, emitter line, and tape flushing, as we just talked about, there's a little bit of a range there. It could be bi-weekly to bi-monthly. I have customers that fit both ends of the spectrum. And if you have something that you're having to flush weekly, I think that it's worth looking at why, or water quality, or something else that you can maybe invest in to stop that. I do know one grower that they have our Cascade drip tape, and they farm a lot of processing tomatoes. And they've decided that every 2 weeks, no matter what field it is, no matter whether it's well water or district water, they keep on a 2-week flushing schedule. Because they found that if they do that, they don't have any problems. They don't risk crop yields or anything like that. So it's super valuable to have a plan. And then chemigation, that kind of comes in whether it's continuous, weekly, or monthly. Some folks do continuous for small water treatment problems, pH adjustments, so on and so forth. Some folks do some weekly clean outs, if you will. And then other folks maybe do like a monthly type shock scenario, where they put in large amounts of material, break it down, and then go through that physical flushing that we talked about to evacuate all that debris. And
when I think about the filter flushing, right? Such a big change with not much time invested.
Absolutely. I mean, and on the right-hand side of this photo is on top of a sand media tank. I pulled out, this is something I worked on last year, where you have actually what's coming out of the well on the right-hand side, and then you have on the left-hand side is actually your media. And so due to a poor performing backflush scenario and poor performing settings, basically mud was just building up inside your media. And the problem now becomes is as you continue to put this inside your media bed, it becomes A, harder and harder to flush out, but B, this type of material has a similar specific gravity to your actual media. So the only way to remove it with the correct velocity, you're going to end up taking most of your media with it too. So the discussion with the grower was, we're actually going to have our service providers come out and we're going to completely empty these tanks and put fresh media in, just 2 years into the cycle of it.
And it looks hot that day too.
It's always hot, but certainly. And on the left-hand side, you could probably see what I call the Nesquik coming out of the end of the line there. And as you can see, we actually have pretty good pressure, but this system had also not been flushed in several years. And the system was actually performing fairly well, but nonetheless, you can push these systems, and no matter how good our products are, you can push them to the breaking point.
That's a fascinating photo, right? It looks like brown clouds coming out of the tubing.
Absolutely. And so now we've done all this, and we're going to operate our system, and it's up to par. But now it's not perfect irrigation scheduling, but it's perfecting our irrigation scheduling. And so having an efficient car doesn't matter if you drive it with the parking brake on. I think you probably heard me say that before, Richard. It's one of the ways that I help kind of relate these things to irrigation systems. We can go out and we can spend a lot of money on a really great irrigation system, and then just really kind of drive it poorly, and all of a sudden all that investment that we made is no longer realized. And I just threw up a bunch of acronyms up here, ETC, ETO, KC, ETA, DVI, all these different things. These are all the things that they mean a lot to me, as I have plenty of acronyms in my title. But what we do at Jane is, with our Jane Logic software, we take all of this information, and this is just some of the information that we're taking, consuming, and then using, and we're turning it into an expert recommendation for really that total control of your irrigation system. Again, I use it as a water services manager for customers, where I'm not even in their field, but I'm writing consistent recommendations. And that's kind of the last part of this, which is our water management services program. If you're not ready to use Jane Logic on your own, you can partner with us, where we will install this technology, and we, as certified professionals, will help make recommendations for you, expert recommendations that allow you to feel very comfortable with the data that you're getting, and then also the recommendations that you're going to be implementing into your farm and into your irrigation practices.
Things here, Cory. One, I'm looking at all those acronyms, and I'm just thankful you're not in charge of Wordle. And number two, I love the water management services from a coaching standpoint, right? I don't have to buy the equipment. Somebody comes out and installs it for me, and then helps me learn how to use all the technology. And it's not very expensive, and there's a money back guarantee. So I just love that option for growers.
No, it's been great. It's been a ton of fun to be a part of, and really see our team grow, where we've doubled our acres in under a year. We've won the 2021 new product contest for the Irrigation Association. Just super proud of the team, and really the knowledge that we have from certified crop advisors all the way down through a number of backgrounds and experiences, and feel like we are the best equipped company to help growers with these types of recommendations and really find a way to save water. A lot of folks say that they can save water. We can literally quantify, we can literally show you how much water we're saving and how we're doing it.
Yeah, you can answer that question, prove it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, some of the simple interfaces that come out of all those acronyms, by the way, just so nobody has to be scared of it, it comes out looking like this, where it pulls all of that information, and then it says, on this block, I need you to run this many hours, and here's how many you have scheduled, and here's how many you've ran. So it's very, very user friendly.
Yeah, that sure is. That's easy to follow.
Absolutely. So with that, I think it wraps up the 7 points I wanted to get, and was trying to be quick so that hopefully, again, I could give people time to go get this done on a Friday afternoon. But even then, maybe it can wait till Monday.
Cory, thank you so much. This was really helpful. And I certainly picked up a few tips that I haven't used before. And so I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time to put this together and educate all of us on this. I also want to say thank you to all of our viewers. As always, you can find all of Cory's other trainings at janesusa.com/trainings. Or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can just search Cory Broad there and you will find some podcasts too. So Cory, thanks very much. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you guys back here next week, where we'll keep on working hard to elevate everybody's awareness of water conservation. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.